I, 30 for female, suspect my husband, 30 for male, is having an affair with our mutual friend, 29 female, and I'm not sure how to proceed. My husband and I have had our ups and downs throughout our relationship of 12 years, but we have always stuck together and helped raise each other up when we were down. We have a mutual friend, we'll call her Jade, who is married to my husband's friend, who I will call Fred. A few years ago my husband and I went through a really rough patch where we separated for a few months. During that time we were able to work out our differences, and he moved back home. Things were a lot better than before the split, but we still had our ups and downs. During that time I confided in two of my close friends, Jade and Mary. Jade was always pretty quiet about the whole thing, which I assumed was due to the fact that she and her husband Fred were also friends with my husband. Mary was quite vocal, which is how her personality is. She has no filter and tells it how it is, whether you want to hear it or not. After my husband had moved back home I noticed that Jade acted oddly around him. She would turn red, or act slightly flirtatious. My husband never reciprocated or even seemed to notice, so I assumed it was all in my head. About a year ago Jade and Fred separated, and Jade moved into a house in my neighborhood. I thought this was odd because Jade and Fred lived about an hour away. During this time Jade would always call my husband and ask him for favors, to come help move some boxes, or do some minor home repairs. No big deal, right? He was the only male she knew in the general area, but I noticed her odd behavior seemed to increase. Her conversations with him on social media increased tenfold, and the frequency in which she texted me dropped. Also her flirting seemed to increase. One day Mary was over my house, and we were hanging out and Jade stopped by. Us three girls were in the living room talking, and my husband came in the room for something. I don't remember why now, but Jade's whole demeanor changed. She Saturday, up straight, sort of fixed her hair a bit, all that. I noticed, but again thought I was just being paranoid. Jade left not much later. After Jade left, Mary turned to me and said Jade acts so weird around him. If I didn't know any better I'd say she had a crush on him. I was shocked that someone else had noticed. I confided in Mary that I had been noticing strange behavior from Jade for a long time, but my husband seemed to be totally clueless. We had a conversation about it, and I felt better knowing it wasn't in my head. I did not feel threatened by her advances, or question my husband's relationship with her in any way. Later that night I jokingly mentioned to my husband what Mary and I had discussed. He seemed shocked, and thought the whole thing was ridiculous. He did concede it was strange, that of all the places Jade could have moved during her split from Fred, she chose our neighborhood. He denied having an inappropriate relationship with Jade, and I believed him. We joked about the absurdity of the whole situation. Fast forward a year, and Jade is back with Fred, and Jade's friendship with my husband has seemed to grow stronger. They talk online a lot, and text each other quite frequently. I never accused my husband of having an affair, but their friendship did cause me to raise my eyebrows. Jade rarely speaks to me anymore, and my husband rarely speaks of Jade. Now I'm about to admit to something I'm not proud of, but my curiosity was getting the better of me. So I checked my husband's private messages on the social media site in which they talk. There were a lot of messages, mostly from his friends and a few from me, but none from Jade, dating back over a year. Edit to clarify, the messages are threads, so even if I don't message him for 3 weeks, it will show up in a single thread with my old messages. I felt like a terrible person, but breathed a sigh of relief. Sort of. I still had a nagging feeling, so I checked his email. I know I'm a poopy person for doing this. He had an email from the social media site saying he had received a private message from Jade the previous night at 11:30 p.m. The message just said you awake, but I had just looked at his private messages and there wasn't one from Jade. He deleted it. He kept all the others, but deleted the one from Jade, or many, since the messages are in threads and he deleted the thread. How peculiar. My relationship with my husband is currently in one of our rough patches. We go through waves, but are always able to make it work because we are in love. But this time it's different. Rather than discuss our problems, my husband has started saying things like we are too different to make this work. We have very different personalities, but it has always been one of our favorite things about our marriage. He is able to pick up in areas in which I am lacking, and vice versa. I was completely shocked to hear him say this. He has mentioned having problems with my personality that he has never once in 12 years had a problem with. Every trait he is picking out are things that he has in common with Jade. For example, I don't drink or go out, Jade does. I don't like the same music as him, Jade does. Little things like that. I asked him if he wanted to move out, and he started panicking saying he didn't know what he wants. Basically he is acting like he doesn't know who to decide between. Of course this is all speculation. That's why I am here. If I ask either one of them if there is something going on between them, of course they will deny it. If I ask Fred if Jade has been acting oddly lately, I will seem like a crazy person. I don't know how to find out what's going on. How do I find out whether or not they are having an affair? Can I? Too long didn't read. I suspect my husband is having an affair with a mutual friend, and I don't know how to find out the truth. Edit. I checked our phone records online, and while my husband and I were having a very tense and heated text conversation today, he was also texting back and forth with a number that I don't recognize. I typed it into my phone, but I don't have a contact for that number, so it might not be Jade. I say might because Fred is very wealthy, and I wouldn't be surprised if Jade has two phones. As I was leaving work, I called Mary and asked her to call the number and ask who it was, to pretend she had the wrong number. She did and said that there was no answer, and the voicemail message was a generic one with no name. I am going to do some detective work tonight, and I will update as I come across anything. Edit 4. I just remembered Fred is an Apple/iPhone genius, so Jade would likely know better than to do anything unsavory on her iPhone, because Fred would find out. I'm leaning towards her having a second phone, but again, no proof. I know most are convinced he is having an affair, and while I feel better knowing I'm not crazy for thinking so, this absolutely sucks. But I don't feel like I have enough definitive proof yet. I need concrete evidence. Edit 2. We work opposite shifts. He's home alone all day. Jade lives an hour away but doesn't work, so she has the time to make the drive. I'm thinking of setting up a nanny cam. Any suggestions on which one? Edit 3. Mary has a friend that runs a business and pays for background check services, so she's going to see if she can find out whose phone number he was texting today. Edit 5. Comments are apparently locked for some reason. I don't know why, but I will post an update in a couple days when I can. Thank you everyone for your— Hey guys, please like, comment, and subscribe. It would really help me out. Thanks. Here were a lot of messages, mostly from his friends and a few from me, but none from Jade. Oh man, that is a giant red flag sadly. I'd say check the cell phone bill to see how often they text back and forth. An unhealthy number. There is more than enough ground to stand on when asking him to establish healthy boundaries. It does sound like some kind of affair is going on. Maybe it started during the break you and your husband took. The way it seems to me is that when I mentioned to him that I thought Jade had a crush on him, it put the idea in his head and it started there. Again, I have no proof, but that's how it feels to me. I just want to know for sure, because if he is cheating, he's gone. But if I'm just being paranoid, I really want to work on saving my marriage. I, female 22, came home to an eviction notice. My new husband, male 24, thought it would be a good time to tell me some good news. Basically, we've been together about 4 years, married for literally 2 freaking weeks. 2 weeks, today, as I came home after a long exhausting day of stupid drama that I really didn't want to hear at work, there was a letter on the door. We're getting evicted because of the dog we're not supposed to have. What a surprise, because my husband refused to find him a new home. It's nothing new to me. The people next door complained because his dog barks at the smallest things. Car driving by, bark. Someone knocking at the door, he goes balls deep nuts. And my husband refused to get him fixed, so he pisses all over the place. I have been beyond PO'd about all of this. I loved my apartment. Where else could I find a cheaper and nicer place in this town? But I made it work because I loved husband. But I digress. I call my husband to tell him that we need to find a place at SAP, ya know, one that accepts loud dogs. And honestly, I have no idea what made him tell me this now, of all the times in the world. I've been talking with someone ... and I'm really sorry, I was just stupid ... it was just me thinking with my noodle. Blah blah blah. He claims he was talking with a chick on Facebook, maybe a month. He said he might have gotten sketched out because of the cold shoulder I've had recently. Work has been hard this week. Maybe he felt guilty. I don't know. The ducked up part is this isn't the first time he's been emotionally cheating. I put that in quotes since neither him nor his Sidichik ever admitted to hooking up. Just romantic talk. But like a ducking idiot, I took him back, and for the most part we made it work. I told him when I signed the papers that I would try to start anew. I would try to hopefully trust him again. I would honestly try to believe him in what he says. But it was all a big scam. It was all a duck game he played. I don't know where to go. I'll be homeless. I don't make enough to get another place. I have $20 in my bank account as of right now. I have no car, and my job is way out in the boonies, so there's nowhere to live close to it. I'm just needing some advice. I am in ducking scrambles. I am a mess. I have no friends that I can stay with. No family. No help. What the hell do I do now? Should I work on it with him since it was just emotional Facebook poop? I don't know. Too long didn't read. I got an eviction notice on my door because of my husband's illegal dog. He tells me he's been just chatting, probably more, with a farm tool on Facebook. If you fight the eviction, you will by yourself sometime. A lot of times, Landlords make it sound like they can toss you on the street immediately after the eviction notice, but in the majority of locations you do have rights and will have some time while the eviction winds its way through the legal process. Do some research on eviction law and renters' rights in your area. Talk to your friend that's getting divorced about if she wants to try to find a place together. Maybe if you pool your resources you can afford a place. I, 20 female. Think my dad, 50 male, is cheating on my mom, 46 female, and she knows it. My parents have been married for 23 years and know each other for 27. They have 4 kids, 13 female, 13 male, 16 female and 20 female. My mom has been really sad for the past 2 weeks, and I've heard her tell me dad that he betrayed her and put her down. She also sent me a picture of a woman wearing a helmet my dad has, asking me if I knew who she was or if I ever saw her. I didn't, and I've only recently noticed the helmet. My mother tries to hide her sadness from my siblings and I, but I think I've figured it out and I don't know how to deal with it. This morning I found out that she packed a bag to go away. I don't want to let her know that I know, and I'm very mad at my dad for making her feel that way. It's all so confusing. Too long didn't read. I think my dad is having an affair. Mom is sad because she knows it but won't show it to us kids. Edit. Big thanks to everyone that answered. Your responses are more or less the same. I'll try my best to help out my mom and make her feel better. This is a very painful time for her, but she can still be a great mother and put her happiness first. Please let her know that you love her and support whatever she decides to do for herself. She needs some encouragement during this time.